Hi, eighth graders. We're here for lesson 4. We're going to be looking at chapter 4 together, and I have a couple little things to share with you that go along with that. So let's get right into it. I'll remind you the book is Farewell to Manzanar by Jean Wakasuki Houston and James D. Houston. Our questions that we're going to look at for chapter 4 are pretty short. There are only 2 again today. However, number 1 is much more in-depth than number 1 yesterday. So we see chapter 4, question 1, as the family settles into the new life in Manzanar, there are plenty of challenges. For each of the 4 items below, list one specific problem the Wakasuki family faces and how the problem is solved. So yes, I want 2 sentences for each of the following. You need to identify what the problem is and how it's a challenge and how it's solved. So the first one there is housing, and we already know from the last 2 chapters what some of the problems are with the housing, and then how the problems are solved. And then we have 3 more: clothing, latrines. Latrines are the toilets or the bathrooms, and then also their privacy. So what are the problems that go along with those, and then how are those problems solved? I also want to point out on this paper the picture that was included there of Charlie Chaplin. He is going to be referenced in this chapter, and Charlie Chaplin was an actor in the 1930s in the silent movies. He was very well known for that mustache, well before the other person who had a mustache like that in World War II. And then he's also the clothing is one of the things that is sort of going to be referenced here. We see these big giant shoes and the big baggy pants. And although this picture I don't really think does 100% justice to what she references here. So what I've decided to do, I'm not going to show you the whole video, but I'll link it on Schoology if you're interested in watching it. On YouTube, I just pulled up a quick little part of a Charlie Chaplin movie, and we're going to watch so that you can see his clothes and how baggy and how goofy Charlie Chaplin is, and so you can understand that comparison that she makes. You kind of see as he moves in here how baggy his pants are, how big his feet are, how goofy and silly. He doesn't seem to know what he's doing sometimes. And that's as much as I'm going to show you of it. I just wanted you to be able to see some of his movements there. And like I said, if you're interested in that, I'll link it later to Schoology. Okay, so let's take a look at our book then. We're going to turn to chapter 4. I really hope that you have a copy. I have a copy at home. And once again, if you wish to read on your own instead of listening to me read it, that is perfectly fine. I know some of you prefer to have the book read to you, and especially in the beginning as we get started here, I will be reading the first few chapters for you. So chapter 4, a common master plan. I don't remember what we ate that first morning. I know we stood for half an hour in cutting wind waiting to get our food. Then we took it back to the cubicle and ate huddled around the stove. Inside, it was warmer than when we left, because Woody was already making good his promise to Mama, tacking up some ends of lath he'd found stuffing rolled paper around the door frame. Trouble was, he had almost nothing to work with. Beyond this temporary weather stripping, there was little else he could do. Months went by, in fact, before our home changed much at all from what it was the day we moved in. Bare floors, blanket partitions, one bulb in each compartment dangling from a roof beam, and open ceilings overhead so that mischievous boys like Ray and Keo could climb up into the rafters and peek into anyone's life. The simple truth is the camp was no more ready for us when we got there than when we were ready for it. We had only the dimmest ideas of what to expect. Most of the families like us had moved out from Southern California with as much luggage as each person could carry. Some old men left Los Angeles wearing Hawaiian shirts and Panama hats, and stepped off the bus at an altitude of 4,000 feet with nothing available but sagebrush and tar paper to stop the April winds pouring down off the backside of the Sierras. The War Department was in charge of all the camps at this point. They began to issue military surplus from the First World War. Olive drab knit caps, earmuffs, peacoats, and canvas leggings. Later on, sewing machines were shipped in and one barracks was turned into a clothing factory. An old seamstress took a peacoat of mine, tore the lining out, opened and flattened the sleeves, added a collar, put armholes in, and handed me back a beautiful cape. By fall, dozens of seamstresses were working full-time, transforming thousands of these old army clothes into capes, slacks, and stylish coats. But until that factory got going and packages from friends outside began to fill out our wardrobes, warmth was more important than style. I couldn't help laughing at Mama walking around in army earmuffs and a pair of wide-cuffed khaki-colored wool trousers, several sizes too big for her. Japanese are generally smaller than Caucasians, and almost all these clothes were oversized. They flopped, they dangled, they hung. It seems comical looking back. We were a band of Charlie Chaplins marooned in the California desert. But at the time, it was pure chaos. That's the only way to describe it. The evacuation had been so hurriedly planned, the camp so hastily thrown together, nothing was complete when we got there, and almost nothing worked. I was sick continually with stomach cramps and diarrhea. At first, it was from the shots they gave us for typhoid in very heavy doses and in assembly line fashion. Swab, jab, swab. Move along now. Swab, jab, swab. Keep it moving. That knocked all of us younger kids down at once with fevers and vomiting. Later, it was the food that made us sick. Young and old alike, the kitchens were too small and badly ventilated. Food would spoil from being left out too long. That summer, when the heat got fierce, it would spoil faster. The refrigeration kept breaking down. The cooks, in many cases, had never cooked before. Each block had to provide its own volunteers. Some were lucky and had a professional or two in their midst. But the first chef in our block had been a gardener all his life and suddenly found himself preparing 3 meals a day for 250 people. The Manzanar runs became a condition of life, and you only hoped that when you rushed to the latrine, one would be in working order. That first morning on our way to the chow line, Mama and I tried to use the women's latrine in our block. The smell of it spoiled what little appetite we had. Outside, men were working in an open trench up to their knees in muck, a common sight in the months to come. Inside, the floor was covered with excrement, and all 12 bowls were erupting like a row of tiny volcanoes. Mama stopped a kimono-wrapped woman stepping past us with her sleeve, pushed up against her nose, and asked, "What do you do?" "Try block 12, the woman said, grimacing. "They have just finished repairing the pipes." It was about 2 city blocks away. We followed her over there and found a line of women waiting in the wind outside the latrine. We had no choice but to join the line and wait with them. Inside, it was like all the other latrines. Each block was built to the same design, just as each of the 10 camps, from California to Arkansas, was built to a common master plan. It was an open room over a concrete slab. The sink was a long metal trough against one wall with a row of spigots for hot and cold water. Down the center of the room, 12 toilet bowls were arranged in 6 pairs, back to back, with no partitions. My mother was a very modest person, and this was going to be agony for her. Sitting down in public among strangers? One old woman had already solved the problem for her by dragging in a large cardboard carton. She set it up around one of the bowls like a 3-sided screen. Oxydol was printed in large black letters down the front. I remember this well, because that was the soap we were issued for laundry. Later on, the smell of it would permeate these rooms. The upended carton was about 4 feet high. The old woman behind it wasn't much taller. When she stood, only her head showed over the top. She was about Granny's age. With great effort, she was trying to fold the sides of the screen together. Mama happened to be at the head of the line now. As she approached the vacant bowl, she and the old woman bowed to each other from the waist. Mama then moved to help her with the carton, and the old woman said very graciously in Japanese, "Would you like to use it?" Happily, gratefully, Mama bowed again and said, "Arigato, thank you. Arigato gozaimasu, thank you very much. I will return it to your barracks." "Oh no, it is not necessary. I will be glad to wait." The old woman unfolded one side of the cardboard while Mama opened the other. Then she bowed again and scurried out the door. Those big cartons were a common sight in the spring of 1942. Eventually, sturdier partitions appeared, one or two at a time. The first were built of scrap lumber. Word would get around that block such and such had partitions now, and Mama and my older sisters would walk halfway across the camp to use them. Even after every latrine in camp was screened, this quest for privacy continued. Many would wait until late at night. Ironically, because of this, midnight was often the most crowded time of all. Like so many of the women there, Mama never did get used to the latrines. It was a humiliation she just learned to endure. Shikata ganai. This cannot be helped. She would quickly subordinate her own desires to those of the family or the community because she knew cooperation was the only way to survive. At the time, she placed a high premium on personal privacy, respected it in others, and hesitated upon it for herself. Almost everyone at Manzanar had inherited this pair of traits from the generations before them who had learned to live in a small, crowded country like Japan. Catch that? That they'd all lived when they were in Japan. It's a small, crowded country. How has that prepared them for what the life that they have in Manzanar? Because of the first, they were able to take a desolate stretch of wasteland and gradually make it livable. But the entire situation there, especially in the beginning, the packed sleeping quarters, the communal mess halls, the open toilets, all this was an open insult to that other private self, a slap in the face you were powerless to change. And that is the end of chapter 4. I'm going to have you submit chapters 3, 4, and 5 together to Schoology, but if you would please make sure that you take the time to answer the questions to chapter 4 while they are fresh in your mind. Please reference the weekly sheets of what it is that you're to do and make your choices as far as what you're completing that goes along with this lesson which day. And I will see you for lesson 5. Have a great day.